A face recognized by millions, a reputation admired worldwide, and a style all of his own. But who was the man behind the legend?
I really truly believe my father never thinks of himself as this great man. He always thinks as a collective.
If we didn't have a Mandela, the history of this country would be different.
It was that balance in his mind. The blacks need the whites and the whites need the blacks. That is Mandela. That is his legacy.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born in 1918 in a small village in South Africa. His name meant troublemaker, one who stirs things up. Later South Africans would call him Madiba, his clan name and an affectionate nickname. His father died when he was 9, so he went to stay with his uncle, a royal chief. Seeing the chief dispense justice set in motion a lifetime desire to fight for equality and democracy. At university, he studied law, but his political activities got him expelled, so he moved to Johannesburg, where he joined the African National Congress. The ANC was a political party opposed to South Africa's racial segregation. Known as apartheid, this system of government legally allowed for discrimination against those who were not white.
He was the leader who was deliberately chosen by the African National Congress to be a symbol of resistance.
Mandela was involved with creating the Freedom Charter, the ANC's blueprint for a non-racial democratic country. This got him arrested for treason, along with 155 others. A proudly defiant Mandela defended himself in court.
I have fought against white domination. I have fought against black domination. I cherish the ideal of a new South Africa, where all South Africans are equal.
The treason trial took 4 years, but eventually all charges were dropped. But during this time, the South African government banned the ANC. Fearing re-arrest, Mandela went underground, but before leaving, he married fellow activist Winnie Madikizela. By now, the conflict between the government and anti-apartheid movements had reached new heights. With most ANC leaders in jail or exile, the children of the townships took up the cause, heeding calls to make the country ungovernable. The violence grew, culminating in the Sharpeville massacre, in which 69 people, mainly school children, were shot dead by police. The government declared a state of emergency, and the ANC responded by ending its policy of passive resistance. It established a military wing, and under Mandela's leadership, started a campaign of sabotage against the government.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
Mandela was again arrested in 1962, followed soon after by other high-profile ANC members. In June 1964, he was convicted of sabotage and treason and imprisoned for life on Robben Island. He wasn't allowed to leave prison to attend the funerals of either his mother or eldest son. Family visits were rare.
I was terrified of leadership dying in prison. I was terrified of imagining the father of my children dying in prison.
Mandela's imprisonment left its scars on his young family.
I was quite nervous. It was like, I'm going to meet this person. He was very mythical to me then. He wasn't like really a father. And I couldn't relate to him as a father as such. I really was quite scared, and I know I was emotional. I think I remember crying when I first saw him.
How they were able to grow up when their mother was held every day, literally every week, by the police. I was arrested every week, and they would hold on my skirts crying, "Mommy, don't go, Mommy, don't go." And I would be pulled into those military vans in front of my children.
Robben Island became known as the Island University. Ironically, some say the government's decision to put the ANC's best and brightest minds all together in one place was a big mistake. Mandela's dignity inspired the rest of the prisoners.
What he did do was bring a sense of understanding that some things don't change instantly, that some issues take time to resolve, and the belief that change must happen yesterday is easier said than done. Many of us went in, we spent our 20s behind bars, arguably very energetic years when we should have been out there having fun, doing all the kinds of things that ordinary 20-year-olds would be doing. But his influence tended to mitigate the rashness, if you like, the urgency for change to happen instantly.
Tension simmered over the next decade until the 1976 Soweto riots again brought the apartheid regime to the attention of the world. Outbreaks of violence continued into the early 1980s as the resistance movement promised to bring the country to its knees.
We are going to dismantle apartheid physically in this country.
And as the violence on the outside continued, Mandela's years on the inside were damaging his health.
His health was failing. He had suffered from TB. He had suffered also from prison conditions. I didn't care about what personal cost I would suffer as long as I kept their names in the front pages internationally.
Pressure for Mandela's release was mounting. The South African government offered him freedom if he gave up his political activities. He refused and sent his daughter Zinzi to speak on his behalf. It was the first time the world had heard from Mandela in 2 decades.
My father says, I cannot and will not give any undertaking at a time when I and you, the people, are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated.
On the one level, it was like I really longed to have this thing in my life that I've never had, but at the same time, I had to rise above it and say, and look at the bigger picture and say, I'd much rather have a proud father coming back home than one who was compromised.
Amanda!
To this day, I just thank God they have turned out to be what they are. Amazing children who have no bitterness at all, who do not say to Matiba and I, we chose the nation before them.
Despite the personal cost to Mandela's family, his principled stance was working. At the Commonwealth meeting in 1987, Britain was the only voice standing out against imposing sanctions on the South African government.
I will have nothing to do with any organization that practices violence. I've never seen anyone from the ANC and would not do so. The ANC says that they will target British companies. This shows what a typical terrorist organization it is.
From terrorist to global civil rights icon, Mandela's reputation continued to grow. He refused to negotiate a power-sharing deal while still in prison. His uncompromising stance forced the government's hand.
Good evening. President P.W. Botha and Mr. Nelson Mandela have met face-to-face in Tuynhuys.
I think it's also an extraordinary situation that a head of government should be talking to a prisoner. The rest of the world considers him to be the most important South African, but the South African government has never taken that view.
I realized then, more than any other time, that as much as I wanted my father to come back home to me, he had actually come back to the nation, because we weren't even alone when we went to fetch him.
And finally, after 27 years, Nelson Mandela became a free man on February the 11th, 1990.
I have spoken about freedom in my lifetime. Your struggle, your commitment, and your discipline has released me to stand before you today. Amanda!
The ANC and other political parties were unbanned. and the stage was set for a new era in South African politics. Mandela's charisma inspired his former political opponents.
On the day he was relieved, I asked myself, what now? Would that ideal for which he was prepared to die, would that have made him bitter, revengeful, vindictive? No, it didn't. It was the opposite.
Well, I would like to be bitter, but I have no time to be bitter. There is work to be done.
That work resulted in South Africa's first ever democratic elections. Millions queued for hours on the 27th of April 1994 to cast their vote for the first time. And 2 weeks later, Mandela became the first black president of the new South Africa.
I, Nelson Mandela, do hereby swear to be faithful to the Republic of South Africa. So help me God. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
It was all beginning for Mandela, but as he inspired the world, he was also grappling with a way to bring back the missing family years.
After he had reconciled the world, I was conscious that it will be important for him to reconcile his family.
My dad came out, I had 3 children, and he would still say to me, "Thou shalt be back by 12:30. And I'd go, "Yeah, right."
And after 27 years in prison, Mandela had a lot of adjusting to do.
He tried all those things of like, I'll lock you out, instructing the guards that when I come, he must be called, I'll be reprimanded, I'll be scolded. And we had a private joke amongst ourselves where we'd say everything they did to him in prison is now doing to us.
A relationship that survived Mandela's imprisonment did not survive his freedom. Not long after being released, he divorced his wife, Winnie. Then a few years later, he met another African icon, Graça Machel, wife of a former Mozambican president.
Madiba was a lonely person when I met him. He had the world in his hands, but at the end of the day, after the public meetings, he would go home and he would be alone. Madiba didn't have anyone to share even the joys of being free, the challenges of the issues which he was dealing with at the time. And just that sense of company you need. After the work, you need to go home and you have your family. You don't have to discuss anything, but to be able to embrace your children, to embrace your wife, to share a meal with someone, all those little things in life which makes it so meaningful and important. He was missing that.
He was also worried about meeting the expectations of the public hero worship that surrounded him.
It gave me a lot of pain to be projected as a messiah, a demigod who would come out of prison and solve problems with a magic wand. That perception created expectations on the part of our people, which no human being could fulfill.
Those who have shared with him private moments, they know what I mean. That he's far from being a saint. And he made mistakes in life also. Not towards his family, he made mistakes. He made mistakes towards his friends. He made mistakes even in political decisions.
The Mandela years were particularly noticeable for the attempted reconciliation. And Mandela devoted most of his energies, particularly in the first 2 years of the presidency, to creating a reassurance amongst all sections of the population, especially the security services and the minority white population.
Mandela brought a sense of hope to the country. It was a time of euphoria and nation building.
To me, Mandela is like God. There's no one that I can compare him with.
He did help build a new image for South Africa and managed to be friends with pretty much everyone. But Mandela wasn't content to only be a political figure. He wanted to use his celebrity status to embrace causes close to his heart. One of his first gestures as president was to give a percentage of his salary straight to charity.
Already, he was distancing himself from his comrades, put his comrades, I think, in an untenable situation because many of them had to rely on those salaries because they had no largesse, they had no Nobel Prize winning, they had no awards that they could rely on, and they had no gifts from wealthy individuals. So Mandela could afford to give up that amount, but in doing so, he immediately enhanced the cult of the individual.
Former enemies became friends as Mandela was feted around the world. He'd become a global icon, and it appeared everyone wanted a part of him.
People will lionize him, and correctly so. But the individual is not what makes the difference. It is others around that individual. And in a way, he discounted many of his comrades who should have helped pull weight in a cabinet, and so they left it to the Mandelas.
He also gets angry. I think people should know that. He gets angry. He is somehow stubborn. You need to convince him. You have to have a very good argument to make him change his mind.
And one thing he refused to compromise on was his stay in office. Right from the beginning of his presidency, he made it clear that he would only serve for one term, and he handed over the reins of government to Thabo Mbeki in 1999. But although he was now officially retired, he didn't step down from the limelight.
You know, like my father's a charmer, and he finds it very easy to talk, especially to children.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Yes?
Everyone wanted to be photographed with him, to use his name at big events to attract public interest. He was happy to oblige, but his smile came with a price attached. Mandela wanted to use his celebrity status to raise as much money as he could for charities. His birthday fundraisers were legendary.
You're not old. You're not old. You're as young as the girl you feel, and I'm 25.
I'll take that up, yeah?
And from rock stars to royalty, he was comfortable with everyone. But communicating with his children was still a learning curve.
My father doesn't know how to say sorry. You'll have to see from his actions that he's sorry. Like he'll have had on hindsight, maybe I was too hard on her, and then you'll see from the actions. But he will never say to you, darling, you were right and I was wrong and I'm sorry. Never. This is a proud Xhosa boy from the village because that's what they were taught. This is what a parent is and this is what like a man is, the authoritarian thing. So in that sense, he likes to be in control.
This control was tested during a high-profile court appearance during his presidency. Mandela was asked to explain his actions when conducting an inquiry into racism in sport. Most South Africans felt it was wrong for him to have had to appear in court, but he handled it with his characteristic diplomacy.
When we arrived at the court, the first thing he did was extend the hand of friendship to his enemy or the people, taking him to court. And when we had a tea break, I asked him about it, and what he said to me is, you shouldn't ever allow your enemy to dictate the grounds for battle. And it's so true, you disarm people by seeing things in a simple way and doing the unexpected, because they were all expecting a fight. But by extending that hand of friendship, it just made things easier for both sides, and that is what he's revered for.
When he went into prison, he was a relatively young man, angry young man. Many times, actually, people say, 27 years, what a waste. No. Those 27 years were quite crucial. He was learning to be magnanimous. He was learning to understand the other person's point of view.
In his sunset years, the love affair with Graça Machel continued to blossom.
That loneliness and need of a shoulder to lean on played a role to bring us together. So it was, in one sense, a meeting of minds, but also a meeting of hearts.
He's loving, but he's not demonstrative. He still finds it hard to be physical because he had no physical contact for so many years. So you always have to make the first move to get him to be physical. You have to be the one to reach out and hold his hand.
No. Okay. No, come.
Madiba has allowed me to continue to be myself. That's one of the great things he offered me, is that he always respected my space. He always respected the causes I had embraced. He wouldn't allow me to travel. At that time, I was still traveling extensively. And he wouldn't mind, which I think even younger men would find it very difficult to accept that. For a man who has gone through the kind of experiences in life, he could become extremely possessive. He's not. Maybe that's what explains what really love means. You don't possess anyone, do you?
After months of media speculation, Mandela's 80th birthday party also became his wedding day.
My wife and I.
And he again resigned from public life.
I am now retiring from retiring. And this is for real. And I hope you'll allow me to rest. And if I have to call, I'll call myself. I would prefer that nobody should call me. Thank you.
And although Mandela spent the rest of his life away from the public eye, he will always be remembered as a man who inspired the world.
The world needs symbols to highlight the best of values we can find in certain human beings. We deliberately minimize his weaknesses and we minimize his vulnerabilities. And we give much more importance because that's what counts. If you like, we even overvalue what he means in goodness.
South Africa today wants men and women who strive to do what no other person has done. We require this for our country. It is your wish, every one of you, that when your last days on earth come, we should be able to say, here lies a person who did his duty on earth. I thank you.